What if everything you believe about yourself isn't actually true? And what if the voice in your head, the one you trust the most, is not your wisdom but a collection of borrowed ideas, inherited fears, and silent agreements you never consciously made? And what if, right now, in this very moment, you are living inside a story that was written long before you understood what it meant to be you? A story shaped by family, culture, education, and countless moments where you learned what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, and what is not. And what if I told you that this story, as real as it feels, is not the ultimate truth, but only one version of reality, one dream among billions, quietly guiding your thoughts, your emotions, and your choices every single day? And as you sit with that possibility, something begins to shift, because deep inside, beyond the noise, beyond the conditioning, there is a quiet awareness that recognizes something familiar, something true, as if you have always known this, as if these words are not teaching you something new, but reminding you of something you forgot, something that has always been there beneath the layers of belief, waiting patiently for you to notice it again, because the journey you are about to take is not about becoming someone else. It is about remembering who you already are beneath the agreements that shaped your world. And maybe you've felt this before, that strange moment when something challenges your beliefs, when a simple idea shakes your certainty, and suddenly you begin to question what you once thought was absolute. Because the truth is, your mind has been trained to accept information without question, to build meaning out of symbols, words, and interpretations, and over time, those meanings become your reality. They become your truth, even when they are not. And this is how the human mind is. Domesticated, gently shaped and molded until it fits into a system that defines who you should be, how you should think, and what you should believe. And yet, even within that system, there is freedom, because the moment you become aware of it, the moment you see the invisible patterns that have been guiding you, you begin to reclaim your power. You begin to see that your thoughts are not always yours, that your reactions are often learned, and that your inner dialogue, the voice that speaks to you constantly, is not always speaking the truth. And this realization, as unsettling as it may feel, is also the doorway to transformation, because awareness is the first step toward freedom. And as this awareness deepens, you begin to notice how easily you take things personally, how quickly you assume meaning behind someone's words, how often you create stories in your mind that may have nothing to do with reality, and slowly, gently, you start to question those patterns, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Because what if the things you believe about others are not true? And what if the things you believe about yourself are simply agreements you accepted without awareness? Agreements that can be changed the moment you choose to see them differently. And this is where the real shift begins. Because when you learn to be impeccable with your word, when you choose your words with clarity and intention, you begin to reshape your reality. And when you stop taking things personally, you free yourself from unnecessary suffering. And when you stop making assumptions, you open the door to understanding. And when you do your best, not to be perfect, but to be present, you begin to live with integrity. And as these simple yet powerful ideas settle into your awareness, something extraordinary starts to happen. You begin to see your life through a different lens, a lens of truth rather than illusion. And still, there is one more step, one deeper layer, because even truth can be distorted if it is not questioned. And this is where the power of doubt enters your life, not as a weakness, but as a strength, not as confusion, but as clarity. Because when you learn to be skeptical, not cynical, but open and aware, you begin to see beyond the surface. You begin to listen, not just to others, but to yourself. And in that listening, you discover a deeper truth, one that is not based on belief, but on direct experience. One that allows you to accept yourself completely, just as you are, and to accept others in the same way, without the need to change, control, or judge. And as you continue to move through this journey, you begin to feel lighter, as if something heavy has been lifted from your mind, because the need to be right starts to fade. The need to prove yourself begins to dissolve, and in its place, there is a quiet sense of peace, a sense of freedom that comes not from changing the world around you, but from changing the way you see it, because the world you experience is shaped by your perception. And when your perception changes, your reality changes with it. And if, in this moment, something inside you feels different, if a small part of you feels seen, understood, or awakened, then take a pause, breathe into that feeling, and recognize that this is just the beginning. Because the journey ahead is not about learning more, it is about seeing more clearly. And if this message resonates with you, if you feel that it can help someone else break free from the invisible patterns that hold them back, then take a moment to like this audiobook and subscribe, not just for yourself, but for those who are still searching, still struggling, still waiting to hear something that reminds them of who they truly are. Because sometimes, the smallest action can create the biggest shift in someone else's life, just as this moment might be creating one in yours. You were not born doubting yourself. You were not born afraid of judgment. And you were never meant to carry the quiet weight of beliefs that whisper you are not enough. Because in the very beginning, before the world gave you its rules, before voices shaped your thinking, before approval became something you chased, you existed in a state of pure awareness, where your perception was open, your expression was honest, and your mind was free. And yet somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, you were introduced to a program, a system of ideas, expectations, and agreements that slowly began to define who you are, what you believe, and how you see the world. And as that realization settles into you, you begin to see that this program was not forced upon you with resistance. It was taught gently, repeatedly, almost invisibly, through parents, teachers, society, culture, and even through the silent observations of how others behaved. And as a child, you learned quickly, because your survival depended on belonging, and belonging required agreement. So you accepted rules about what is right and wrong, what is good and bad, what makes you worthy and what makes you less. And over time, those agreements became your belief system, shaping your inner dialogue, influencing your emotions, and quietly constructing the reality you now live in. And as you reflect on this, something deeper begins to unfold, because you start to recognize that this is not just your story, this is the human experience, a shared process of domestication where the mind is trained to follow patterns, to seek approval, to avoid rejection, and to build an identity based on external validation. And while this process creates order and structure, it also creates limitation, because the same beliefs that help you fit in can also hold you back, keeping you trapped in cycles of fear, doubt, and self-judgment. And this is where the journey of self-awareness truly begins, because the moment you see the program, you are no longer completely controlled by it. And as that awareness grows, you begin to notice how your thoughts are not always original, how your reactions are often conditioned, and how your perception of reality is filtered through layers of assumptions and interpretations. And suddenly, the idea of truth becomes more complex, because what you once believed to be absolute starts to feel flexible, almost uncertain. And this is not a loss of clarity. It is the beginning of deeper understanding, because truth is not something handed to you. It is something you discover through awareness, through questioning, and through the courage to look beyond what you have been taught. And in that space of questioning, you begin to reclaim your power, because instead of reacting automatically, you start observing. Instead of believing everything your mind tells you, you begin to doubt, not in a way that creates confusion, but in a way that creates clarity, because the power of doubt allows you to break free from illusions. It allows you to see that not every thought is true, not every belief is valid, and not every story you tell yourself reflects reality. And this shift, as subtle as it may feel, is one of the most important steps in personal growth because it opens the door to conscious living. And as you step through that door, you start to understand the importance of your word, not just the words you speak to others, but the words you speak to yourself. Because your inner dialogue is constantly shaping your mindset, reinforcing your beliefs, and influencing your emotions. And when your words are careless, when they are filled with judgment, criticism, or negativity, they create a reality that reflects those patterns. But when your words are intentional, when they are aligned with truth, integrity, and awareness, they begin to transform your experience, guiding you toward emotional freedom and mental clarity. And naturally, as your awareness of words deepens, you begin to see how often you take things personally, how easily you attach meaning to other people's actions, interpreting them through your own beliefs and insecurities. And yet, when you pause and observe, you realize that most of what others say and do is not about you at all. It is about their own program, their own beliefs, their own perception of reality. And in that realization, something shifts, because you no longer feel the need to defend yourself, to prove yourself, or to carry the weight of someone else's opinions. And this creates space for peace, space for understanding, space for growth. And as that space expands, you also begin to notice how assumptions quietly shape your experience, how your mind fills in gaps with stories that may not be true, and how those stories influence your emotions and actions, often leading to misunderstandings and unnecessary suffering. And when you become aware of this pattern, you gain the ability to pause, to question, to communicate with clarity instead of assumption. And this not only improves your relationships, but also strengthens your connection with yourself, because you are no longer reacting to imagined realities. You are responding to what is real. And through this process, something powerful begins to emerge, a sense of responsibility, not in a heavy or overwhelming way, but in a liberating way, because you start to see that you are the creator of your experience, not in control of everything that happens, but in control of how you interpret, respond, and grow from it. And this is where the idea of always doing your best takes on new meaning. Because your best is not about perfection, it is about presence. It is about showing up with awareness, with intention, and with a willingness to learn, no matter the outcome. And as you continue this journey, the concept of the dream of reality becomes clearer, because you begin to see that life is not just happening to you. It is being filtered through your perception, shaped by your beliefs, and influenced by your awareness. And when you change the way you see, you change the way you experience. And this is the essence of transformation, not changing the world outside, but changing the lens through which you view it. And as that lens becomes clearer, your life begins to feel lighter, more aligned, more authentic. And in that alignment, you start to break free from limiting beliefs, those silent agreements that once defined your worth, your abilities, and your potential. And as those beliefs dissolve, you begin to rebuild yourself, not based on fear or expectation, but based on truth, awareness, and intention. And this is where true confidence begins, not from external validation, but from internal clarity, from knowing who you are beyond the program, beyond the conditioning, beyond the illusion. And as this clarity deepens, you naturally move toward emotional resilience, because you are no longer controlled by every thought, every opinion, or every situation. You are grounded, aware, and present. And this presence allows you to navigate life with a sense of calm, even in uncertainty, because you understand that your power lies not in controlling everything, but in mastering your awareness, in choosing how you respond, in choosing how you grow. And as you sit with this understanding, feeling the quiet strength of awareness, the subtle shift in your mindset, and the gentle unfolding of your personal transformation, you begin to realize that this journey is not about reaching a final destination. It is about continuous growth, daily awareness, and conscious living. And in that realization, there is a sense of peace, a sense of freedom, and a deep knowing that you are exactly where you need to be, learning, evolving, and creating your reality moment by moment, with every thought, every word, and every choice you make. What if the words you speak every day are not just sounds, but powerful symbols shaping your entire reality? And what if every belief you hold, every judgment you make, every story you tell yourself is built from these symbols, quietly forming agreements that define who you think you are? Because the moment you begin to see this, something inside you starts to awaken, a subtle realization that your world is not as fixed as it once seemed, that your reality is not simply what exists, but what you have learned to interpret through language, meaning, and shared understanding. And as you sit with that idea, you begin to notice how everything around you is made of symbols, words, images, gestures, expressions, all carrying meaning that you have been taught to understand. And from the moment you were a child, you were introduced to this symbolic system, learning the names of things, learning what they represent, learning how to communicate. And through that process, you didn't just learn language. You learned how to think, how to interpret, how to assign meaning to the world, and slowly, without even realizing it, you began to agree with everything you were taught, forming silent agreements about reality, about others, and most importantly, about yourself. And as those agreements settled into your mind, they became the foundation of your belief system, shaping your perception in ways that feel natural, even unquestionable. Because when a belief is repeated enough times, when it is reinforced by others, when it is supported by emotional experiences, it begins to feel like truth. And yet, when you look closely, you begin to see that these beliefs are not absolute. They are interpretations, agreements built on symbols, and this is where the illusion begins. Because when you mistake an agreement for truth, you limit your ability to see beyond it. And this realization can feel both liberating and unsettling, because it means that much of what you believe may not be inherently real, but constructed, agreed upon, and maintained through repetition and acceptance. And as you allow yourself to question this, not with fear, but with curiosity, you begin to loosen the grip of those agreements, creating space for awareness to grow. And in that space, you start to see that you are not bound by every belief you have inherited, that you have the power to examine them, to choose which ones serve you, and to release those that do not. And as this awareness deepens, your relationship with communication begins to shift, because you realize that words are not just tools for expression, they are instruments of creation, shaping not only how you communicate with others, but how you communicate with yourself. And your inner dialogue, that constant stream of thoughts, is built from the same symbols, the same agreements, repeating patterns that reinforce your beliefs. And when those patterns are negative, critical, or limiting, they create a reality that reflects those qualities, keeping you trapped in cycles of self-doubt and emotional struggle. And naturally, as you observe this inner dialogue, you begin to understand the importance of being impeccable with your word, not as a rule imposed from outside, but as a conscious choice, a way of aligning your communication with truth, clarity, and intention. And when you choose your words carefully, when you speak with awareness, you begin to transform the way you experience yourself and the world around you. Because your words are no longer reinforcing limitation, they are opening the door to possibility. And as that transformation unfolds, you start to notice how often you make assumptions, how quickly your mind fills in gaps with stories, interpreting situations without full understanding. And these assumptions, though they may feel logical, are often based on incomplete information, shaped by past experiences and existing beliefs. And when you act on them, they create misunderstandings, tension, and unnecessary emotional pain. But when you become aware of this pattern, you gain the ability to pause, to question, to seek clarity instead of assumption. And this simple shift can profoundly change the way you relate to others and to yourself. And as you continue to explore this, you begin to see how these agreements, these beliefs, are not just personal. They are collective, shared by groups, cultures, societies, creating a larger dream of reality that everyone participates in, a shared understanding of what is real, what is valuable, what is acceptable. And while this shared dream creates connection and structure, it can also reinforce limitations. Because when everyone agrees on something, it becomes harder to question, harder to see beyond. And yet, the moment you step back, the moment you observe rather than react, you begin to see the dream for what it is, a creation of human minds, shaped by symbols and agreements. And in that awareness, the power of doubt becomes your ally, because it allows you to question not only your personal beliefs, but also the collective ones, not to reject them blindly, but to examine them with clarity, to ask whether they are true, whether they serve you, whether they align with the person you are becoming. And through this process, you begin to develop critical thinking, a deeper level of understanding that goes beyond surface-level acceptance, allowing you to navigate the world with awareness and intention. And as you practice this, you begin to feel a shift in your emotional state, because the weight of unquestioned beliefs starts to lift, the need to conform begins to soften, and in its place, there is a sense of freedom, a sense of possibility, because you realize that you are not defined by every agreement you have made, that you have the power to change, to grow, to evolve. And this realization is at the heart of personal transformation, because it moves you from unconscious living to conscious creation. And as this transformation continues, you naturally begin to break free from limiting beliefs, those silent agreements that once dictated your worth, your abilities, your potential. And as you release them, you create space for new beliefs, beliefs that are aligned with truth, with awareness, with your authentic self. And this is where your mindset begins to shift from limitation to possibility, from fear to curiosity, from doubt to clarity. And in that clarity, you begin to see that your reality is not fixed. It is fluid, shaped by your perception, influenced by your awareness. And when you change the way you perceive, you change the way you experience. And this is the essence of emotional freedom, not the absence of challenges, but the ability to navigate them with awareness, without being controlled by unconscious patterns or limiting beliefs. And as you move forward with this understanding, you begin to embody the art of being human, not as something rigid or defined, but as something dynamic, evolving, and deeply connected to awareness. Because to be human is not just to exist, it is to create, to interpret, to assign meaning. And when you become conscious of that process, you reclaim your power, you step out of automatic patterns, and you begin to live with intention. And as you settle into this awareness, feeling the subtle shift in your perception, the growing clarity in your thoughts, and the quiet strength in your presence, you realize that this journey is not about rejecting symbols or agreements, but about understanding them, using them consciously, and choosing which ones align with your truth. And in that choice, there is freedom, there is growth, and there is a deep sense of peace that comes from knowing that you are no longer living by default, but by design, creating your reality moment by moment, with awareness, intention, and a clear understanding of the art that shapes your world. There is a story you have been telling yourself for as long as you can remember, a quiet, constant narration running in the background of your life, shaping your identity, guiding your choices, influencing your emotions. And what if that story, the one you trust without question, is not the truth, but a carefully constructed illusion, built from words, reinforced by repetition, and accepted simply because you heard it so many times that it began to feel real? Because the moment you begin to see this, the moment you pause and truly listen to your own inner voice, you realize something powerful, something deeply unsettling, and yet incredibly liberating, that the story of you was written long before you ever had the chance to question it. You were given a name, and with that name came expectations, meanings, and identities. You were told who you are, what you are capable of, what is good about you, what needs to be fixed, and slowly, gently, consistently, you began to believe those descriptions, not because they were objectively true, but because they were repeated, reinforced, and emotionally charged. And as a child, you didn't have the awareness to question them. You simply absorbed them, allowing them to shape your perception, your mindset, and your sense of self. And over time, those external voices became your internal voice, forming the foundation of your inner dialogue. That inner dialogue, the voice that speaks to you every moment, became the narrator of your life, commenting on your actions, judging your decisions, comparing you to others, reminding you of your past mistakes, predicting your future limitations. And because it sounds like you, because it feels familiar, you trust it, you believe it, you allow it to define your reality, even when it speaks words that limit you, even when it creates fear, doubt, and insecurity. And this is how the domestication of the mind continues, not through external control, but through internal repetition. You begin to notice how often this voice is not kind, how often it speaks in ways you would never speak to someone you care about, and yet you accept it, you normalize it, because it has been there for so long, shaping your belief system, reinforcing the agreements you made unconsciously, agreements about your worth, your abilities, your place in the world. And as these agreements settle deeper into your subconscious, they begin to influence everything: your decisions, your relationships, your goals, your fears, your sense of possibility. But something shifts the moment you become aware of it, because awareness breaks the illusion. Awareness creates space between you and the voice. And in that space, you begin to question, you begin to doubt, not yourself, but the story you have been telling yourself. And this is where the power of transformation begins, because when you question the story, you take the first step toward rewriting it. The first agreement invites you into this transformation in a way that is both simple and profound. It asks you to be impeccable with your word, not just in how you speak to others, but in how you speak to yourself. Because your words are powerful, they are not just sounds. They are creative forces that shape your reality. Every time you say, "I am not good enough," every time you think, "I always fail," you are reinforcing a belief, strengthening a neural pathway, deepening the story, and over time, that story becomes your truth, not because it is objectively real, but because you have repeated it so consistently that it feels undeniable. Now imagine the shift that happens when you begin to change your words, when you become conscious of your inner dialogue, when you choose to speak to yourself with clarity, honesty, and compassion, not with empty affirmations, but with grounded truth. When you say, "I am learning, I am growing, I am capable," you begin to rewrite the script, slowly, gently, but powerfully. And this is where mindfulness becomes your greatest tool, because it allows you to observe your thoughts without immediately believing them, to witness your inner dialogue without becoming controlled by it. That awareness creates a new kind of freedom, a freedom that does not depend on external circumstances, but on your ability to choose your words, your interpretations, your responses. And as you practice this, you begin to notice subtle shifts in your mindset. Moments where you catch yourself before falling into old patterns, moments where you pause instead of reacting, moments where you choose growth over fear. And these moments, though they may seem small, are the building blocks of personal transformation. The story of you begins to change, not all at once, not in a dramatic instant, but in quiet, consistent ways. Your inner voice becomes less critical, more supportive. Your perception of reality becomes less rigid, more open, and as your awareness deepens, you begin to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes them. You are not your past. You are the one who learns from it. And this realization brings a sense of emotional freedom that is both empowering and deeply peaceful. You start to let go of the need to prove yourself, to justify your worth, to meet expectations that were never truly yours. And in that letting go, you create space for authenticity, for self-expression, for a life that is aligned with your true self rather than a conditioned identity. And this is where the journey becomes truly life-changing, because you are no longer living based on unconscious agreements. You are living with intention, with awareness, with clarity. The more you practice being impeccable with your word, the more you notice how it influences every area of your life. Your communication becomes clearer, your relationships become more authentic, your confidence begins to grow, not from external validation, but from internal alignment. And as this alignment strengthens, you begin to embody a success mindset, not defined by achievements or outcomes, but by your ability to stay grounded, aware, and intentional in every moment. You begin to understand that manifestation is not just about thinking positive thoughts. It is about aligning your words, your beliefs, and your actions. It is about creating a reality that reflects your truth rather than your fears. And this alignment requires discipline, not in a restrictive way, but in a conscious, empowering way, a commitment to observe your thoughts, to choose your words, to stay present, and to continue growing. Even when it feels uncomfortable, that discomfort, that resistance you feel when you challenge old beliefs, is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are breaking free, that you are stepping out of the familiar patterns of the mind and into a space of possibility. And this is where your mental toughness begins to develop, not through force, but through awareness, through your willingness to face your thoughts without being controlled by them. You begin to rebuild yourself, not from a place of lack, but from a place of awareness, choosing beliefs that support your growth, choosing words that empower you, choosing actions that align with your values. And as you continue this process, you realize that personal development is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming conscious. It is about seeing clearly, thinking critically, and living intentionally. That clarity transforms your perception of reality, allowing you to see beyond illusion, beyond assumption, beyond the limitations of your past beliefs. And in that clarity, you find a deeper sense of peace, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing that you are not defined by your story, you are the author of it. And every moment is an opportunity to write a new sentence, to choose a new perspective, to create a new experience. You begin to move through life with a different energy, less reactive, more responsive, less controlled by fear, more guided by awareness. And this shift, though it may not always be visible to others, is deeply transformative because it changes the way you experience everything, your relationships, your work, your challenges, your successes, and most importantly, your relationship with yourself. The voice in your head becomes a tool rather than a master, a guide rather than a critic. And as that shift continues, you feel a sense of freedom that is difficult to describe, a lightness, a clarity, a deep inner knowing that you are no longer trapped in the story you once believed. You are creating a new one, moment by moment, word by word, thought by thought. And in that creation, you discover something profound, that the truth you have been searching for is not outside of you. It is within you, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be expressed, waiting to be lived. And as you continue this journey, with awareness, with intention, with a commitment to your growth, you begin to experience life not as something that happens to you, but as something you actively participate in, something you shape, something you create, through every word you speak, every thought you choose, and every belief you embrace. What if the world you are reacting to is not the same world others are living in? What if every person you meet is walking through a completely different reality, shaped not by facts, but by beliefs, perceptions, memories, and silent agreements? And what if most of your pain has never come from what actually happened, but from how your mind interpreted it? Because the moment you begin to see this, something powerful begins to shift inside you. A realization that your experience of life is deeply personal, filtered through your own lens, and that everyone else is doing the exact same thing. You look at someone and believe you understand them. You hear their words and assume you know what they mean. You witness their actions and create a story about their intentions, and yet, all of that understanding is happening inside your mind, built from your own beliefs, your own past experiences, your own emotional patterns, and in the same moment, that person is doing the same with you, interpreting your words, your actions, your expressions through their own internal world, and this is where confusion begins. This is where misunderstanding grows, because you are not just interacting with each other, you are interacting with each other's perceptions. This is why every mind is truly its own world, a unique dream of reality where everything is interpreted differently, where meaning is created individually, and where truth is often shaped by belief rather than objective clarity. And once you begin to see this, you start to understand why taking things personally creates so much unnecessary suffering. Because when someone speaks or acts, they are expressing their world, not yours. They are revealing their beliefs, their fears, their understanding. And when you take it personally, you make their world about you. You bring their interpretations into your reality, and suddenly, you carry something that was never truly yours. Notice how often this happens, how a single comment can stay with you for hours, even days, how your mind replays it, analyzes it, adds meaning to it, turning it into something bigger than it was. And in that process, you create emotional pain, not because of what was said, but because of what you believe it means. And this is where awareness becomes your greatest ally. Because the moment you pause and recognize that what you are reacting to is your interpretation, not absolute truth, you create space, space to question, space to breathe, space to choose a different response. That space is where emotional freedom begins, not by controlling what others say or do, but by understanding that their words are reflections of their own world. And when you stop taking things personally, you release yourself from the need to defend, to justify, to prove, and instead, you begin to observe, to listen, to understand, and in that understanding, you find a sense of peace that does not depend on external validation, but on internal clarity. This clarity also transforms the way you communicate, because you begin to realize that just as you interpret others through your own lens, they interpret you through theirs. And this awareness brings a new level of responsibility, a conscious effort to be impeccable with your word, to speak clearly, honestly, and with intention, not to control how others perceive you, but to align your expression with truth. And when you do this, your communication becomes a bridge rather than a barrier, a way of connecting rather than dividing. At the same time, you begin to see how assumptions quietly shape your reality, how your mind fills in gaps with stories that feel real but may not be accurate. And these assumptions, though often unconscious, influence your emotions, your reactions, your relationships, and when you become aware of them, you gain the ability to question them, to replace them with curiosity, to ask instead of assume, to listen instead of conclude. And this simple shift can transform not only your interactions, but your entire experience of life. Because when you stop assuming, you stop creating unnecessary suffering. You stop reacting to imagined realities, and you begin to engage with what is actually present. And this presence, this ability to stay grounded in the moment, is a key part of mindfulness, a practice that allows you to observe your thoughts without becoming lost in them, to notice your emotions without being controlled by them. And through this awareness, you develop a deeper understanding of yourself and others. That understanding leads to a profound shift in your mindset, because you begin to see that your perception is not fixed. It is flexible. It can change. It can evolve. And when you actively choose to see things differently, when you question your beliefs, when you remain open to new perspectives, you expand your reality. You move beyond limitation, and you begin to experience life with greater clarity and possibility. This is where the power of doubt becomes essential, not as a source of confusion, but as a tool for growth. Because when you doubt your assumptions, when you question your interpretations, you create space for truth to emerge. You move beyond automatic thinking, beyond conditioned responses, and you begin to engage with life more consciously, more intentionally. And this conscious engagement is the foundation of personal transformation. As this transformation unfolds, you start to notice changes in your emotional resilience. Because you are no longer as easily affected by external events, you are no longer reacting impulsively. You are responding thoughtfully, with awareness, with intention. And this shift does not mean you stop feeling emotions. It means you understand them, you observe them, you allow them without being overwhelmed by them. And in that understanding, you find strength, a quiet, steady strength that comes from within. That inner strength allows you to navigate challenges with a sense of calm, to face uncertainty without fear, to engage with life without being controlled by it. And this is where true personal growth happens, not in avoiding difficulties, but in changing how you experience them, in seeing them not as obstacles, but as opportunities for learning, for awareness, for growth. Through this journey, you also begin to recognize the role of discipline, not as restriction, but as consistency, a commitment to stay aware, to practice mindfulness, to choose your thoughts and actions consciously. And this discipline becomes the foundation of a growth mindset, a way of living that embraces change, that seeks understanding, that values progress over perfection. And as you continue to develop this mindset, you begin to rebuild yourself, not based on old beliefs, but on new awareness, creating a version of yourself that is aligned with truth, with clarity, with intention. And this process is not about becoming someone new. It is about uncovering who you truly are beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the agreements that once defined you. This is where manifestation takes on a deeper meaning, not as a magical process, but as a natural outcome of alignment. Because when your thoughts, your words, and your actions are aligned with your truth, you begin to create a reality that reflects that alignment, a reality that feels authentic, fulfilling, and meaningful. And this is the essence of the law of attraction, not attracting things through desire alone, but through clarity, through awareness, through intentional living. As you move through this experience, you begin to feel a sense of connection, not just with others, but with yourself, a deeper understanding of your own mind, your own emotions, your own patterns. And this understanding brings a sense of peace, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing that you are not defined by external circumstances, but by your response to them, by your awareness of them, by your ability to grow through them. You begin to see life not as something that happens to you, but as something you actively participate in, something you shape through your perception, your beliefs, your awareness. And this shift in perspective is what makes this journey truly life-changing, because it empowers you to take responsibility for your experience, to move beyond victimhood, to step into a space of creation. And in that space, you find freedom, not the kind that removes all challenges, but the kind that allows you to face them with clarity, with strength, with awareness. And as you continue to walk this path, you begin to trust yourself more, to listen more deeply, to see more clearly. And in that trust, in that clarity, in that awareness, you find a sense of peace that feels both grounding and expansive, a reminder that every mind is a world. And within your world, you have the power to create, to grow, and to experience life in a way that is true to you. A quiet but unsettling truth begins to rise within you, a realization that not everything you believe is real, not everything you think is true, and not every story you have accepted about yourself, about others, about life, holds any real foundation beyond repetition and agreement. Because what if so much of what you call reality is simply a story you learned to trust, a narrative shaped over time, reinforced by voices around you, and accepted without question, and the moment you begin to feel this shift, something inside you awakens, a deeper awareness that invites you to look again, to question again, to see again. You have spent years building your understanding of the world, collecting ideas, beliefs, judgments, opinions, each one forming a structure that feels solid, dependable, even unquestionable. Yet beneath that structure lies something fragile, something uncertain, because most of these beliefs were never truly yours. They were given to you, taught to you, repeated until they felt like truth, and in that process, your mind learned to accept without asking, to believe without doubting, to react without understanding. And this is where illusion quietly takes root. That illusion becomes your inner dialogue, the voice that speaks constantly, interpreting everything you see, everything you hear, everything you experience, and it speaks with confidence, with certainty, as if it knows the truth. But often, it is simply repeating old agreements, old conditioning, patterns of thought that were never questioned. And because you hear this voice so often, you begin to trust it. You begin to believe that it is you, that it defines you, that it understands reality clearly. But what if it doesn't? What if that voice is not truth, but interpretation? This is where the third agreement begins to transform your awareness. The invitation to not make assumptions becomes deeper, more powerful, evolving into a call to question everything, to doubt the stories your mind creates, to pause before accepting any belief as absolute truth. And this doubt is not weakness. It is strength. It is clarity. It is the doorway to freedom. Because when you doubt, you create space. And in that space, you begin to see beyond illusion. Consider how often your mind jumps to conclusions, how quickly it fills in gaps, how easily it creates meaning without evidence. Someone doesn't respond to you, and your mind tells a story. Someone speaks in a certain tone, and your mind assigns intention. Someone looks at you in a particular way, and your mind builds a narrative. And in each of these moments, you react not to reality, but to your interpretation of it. And this is where emotional pain is born, not from what is happening, but from what you believe is happening. Now imagine stepping back from that automatic process. Imagine observing your thoughts instead of immediately believing them, noticing the assumptions, the judgments, the stories, and instead of accepting them, you question them. You ask yourself, is this true? Is this real? Or is this just a story my mind is creating? And in that questioning, something powerful happens. The illusion begins to dissolve, and clarity begins to emerge. This clarity is not about finding absolute answers. It is about recognizing uncertainty, about understanding that your perception is limited, that your knowledge is incomplete, and that truth is often more complex than your mind can immediately grasp. And this awareness brings humility, a willingness to listen, to learn, to remain open. And this openness transforms your communication. Because you no longer assume you understand others completely, you begin to listen more deeply, to ask more questions, to engage with curiosity rather than certainty. As you continue this journey, you begin to notice how this shift affects your emotional state. Because when you stop believing every thought, when you stop reacting to every assumption, you create distance between you and your emotions, not to suppress them, but to understand them, to observe them. And in that observation, you gain control, not by force, but by awareness. And this awareness becomes the foundation of emotional freedom. You begin to realize that your emotions are responses to your beliefs, to your interpretations. And when those interpretations change, your emotional experience changes as well. And this is where true personal transformation begins, not by changing the external world, but by changing how you perceive it, how you interpret it, how you engage with it. And this shift in perception is one of the most powerful tools you have. Through this process, You also begin to understand the concept of the dream of reality, the idea that your life is shaped by the story you believe, the narrative you accept. And when that narrative is based on assumptions, on unexamined beliefs, it can limit you. It can create fear. It can hold you back. But when you begin to question that narrative, when you begin to rewrite it with awareness, with intention, you step into a new experience of life, one that is aligned with truth rather than illusion. This is where the power of awareness becomes your guide, helping you recognize when you are slipping into old patterns, when you are believing stories without questioning them, when you are reacting instead of observing, and each time you become aware, you have a choice, a moment of decision where you can either continue the pattern or shift it, and each small shift builds momentum, gradually transforming your mindset. That transformation is not instant. It requires discipline, consistency, a commitment to stay aware even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it challenges what you have always believed. And this discipline is not about control. It is about practice, the daily practice of mindfulness, of observing your thoughts, of questioning your assumptions, of choosing clarity over illusion. And through this practice, you begin to rebuild yourself, not based on old conditioning, but on conscious awareness. As you rebuild, you start to see how this new way of thinking influences every area of your life. Your relationships become clearer, your communication becomes more authentic, your decisions become more intentional, and your sense of self becomes stronger, more grounded, because it is no longer based on external validation, but on internal understanding. This is where your mindset truly evolves, moving from automatic reaction to conscious creation, from assumption to inquiry, from illusion to clarity, and this evolution is what leads to a success mindset, not just in terms of external achievements, but in the way you experience life, with greater peace, greater confidence, greater resilience. You begin to feel a sense of empowerment, a recognition that you are not a passive observer of your reality, but an active participant, someone who can question, who can choose, who can grow, and this empowerment fuels your motivation, your desire to continue exploring, to continue learning, to continue expanding your awareness. In this space, manifestation becomes a reflection of alignment, because when your thoughts are clear, when your beliefs are conscious, when your actions are intentional, you naturally create experiences that match that clarity. And this is where the law of attraction becomes practical, grounded, not based on wishful thinking, but on conscious living. As this journey continues, you develop a deeper sense of mental toughness, not through resistance, but through understanding, through the ability to remain centered even when faced with uncertainty, even when your old beliefs are challenged, and this strength allows you to navigate life with confidence, with clarity, with a sense of purpose. You begin to notice that your inner dialogue has changed, that the voice in your mind is no longer dominating, no longer dictating your experience, but instead, it becomes a tool, something you can observe, something you can guide, something you can refine, and this shift creates a sense of inner peace, a quiet space where you can think clearly, feel deeply, and act intentionally. And as you continue to walk this path, you realize that the journey is not about reaching a final truth, but about staying open, staying aware, staying willing to question, to learn, to grow, because truth is not a fixed destination. It is an evolving understanding, something that deepens as your awareness expands. In that understanding, you find freedom, the freedom to let go of limiting beliefs, the freedom to release assumptions, the freedom to experience life without being trapped by illusion. And this freedom feels light, expansive, grounding, a sense that you are finally seeing clearly, finally understanding deeply, finally living consciously. You carry this awareness with you, not as a rigid rule, but as a gentle reminder, a quiet presence that guides you, that helps you stay aligned with truth, that encourages you to keep questioning, to keep listening, to keep growing. And in that ongoing journey, you discover something profound. That clarity is not something you find once. It is something you practice, something you choose, something you live, moment by moment, thought by thought, breath by breath, as you continue to shape your reality with awareness, intention, and truth. A belief can feel more real than reality itself. It can guide your emotions, shape your actions, and define your identity without you ever questioning where it came from. And in this quiet but powerful realization, you begin to see that what you believe is not just a thought. It is a force, a silent architect building your perception of the world, influencing how you see yourself, how you relate to others, and how you experience life moment by moment. You were not born believing what you believe today. You were taught, conditioned, guided through repetition, through stories, through symbols that carried meaning long before you understood them. And one of the most striking examples of this is something so familiar, so widely accepted in childhood, that it rarely gets questioned: the symbol of Santa Claus, a story that many accepted as truth, not because it was proven, but because it was agreed upon, reinforced by parents, teachers, society. And through that agreement, it became real in your mind. It shaped your emotions, your expectations, your excitement, and your sense of wonder. You believed, and because you believed, it felt true. You felt the joy, the anticipation, the magic, and in those moments, the belief created a reality that was emotionally authentic, even if it was not factually accurate. And this is where something profound begins to unfold, because the same mechanism that made that childhood belief feel real is still active in your life today, shaping your perception, influencing your mindset, guiding your reactions. As you begin to reflect on this, you start to notice how many of your current beliefs were formed in a similar way, not through direct experience, but through repetition, through agreement, through the influence of others. And once those beliefs were accepted, they became part of your internal world, part of your inner dialogue, quietly directing how you think, how you feel, how you interpret everything around you. This is how the domestication of the mind works, slowly, consistently, shaping your understanding of what is right, what is wrong, what is possible, what is not. And over time, these beliefs become so deeply embedded that they feel like truth. They feel unquestionable. And yet, just like the belief in Santa Claus eventually changed when new awareness emerged, many of your current beliefs are also open to transformation. That transformation begins with awareness, with the willingness to question what you have always accepted, to look beyond the surface, to recognize that belief does not equal truth. And this is where the power of doubt becomes essential, not as a source of confusion, but as a tool for clarity. Because when you allow yourself to doubt, you create space for new understanding, you open the door to deeper insight. In that space, you begin to examine your beliefs more closely, asking yourself where they came from, whether they truly serve you, whether they align with your authentic self. And this process can feel uncomfortable, because it challenges the foundation of your identity. It asks you to reconsider what you have always known. But within that discomfort lies growth, lies freedom, lies the possibility of seeing yourself and the world in a completely new way. As this awareness deepens, you start to notice how your beliefs influence your emotional experiences, how a single thought can trigger a cascade of feelings, how a belief about yourself can either empower you or limit you. And this is where personal transformation becomes real, because when you change your beliefs, you change your emotional patterns, your behaviors, your outcomes. This is not about forcing yourself to believe something new. It is about understanding the beliefs you already hold, recognizing their impact, and consciously choosing which ones to keep and which ones to release. And this choice is where your power lies, the power to rebuild yourself, to create a mindset that supports growth, that encourages possibility, that aligns with your true potential. Through this process, your perception of reality begins to shift, because you are no longer seeing the world through a fixed lens. you are seeing it as something flexible, something influenced by your beliefs, something that can change as your awareness expands. And this shift brings a sense of freedom, a realization that you are not trapped by your past, not limited by old agreements, but capable of creating a new experience of life. That new experience is shaped by clarity, by the ability to distinguish between truth and illusion, to recognize when you are reacting to a belief rather than a fact, to pause and question before you respond. And in that pause, you gain control, not by suppressing your thoughts or emotions, but by understanding them, by observing them with awareness. This awareness also transforms your communication, because you begin to recognize that others are operating from their own beliefs, their own perceptions, their own internal worlds. And just as your beliefs shape your reality, they shape theirs. And this understanding brings compassion, patience, a willingness to listen rather than judge, to understand rather than assume. As you continue to explore this, you begin to see how beliefs influence not just your thoughts and emotions, but your actions, your habits, your daily choices. And this is where discipline becomes important, not as a rigid structure, but as a consistent practice of awareness, a commitment to stay present, to question your beliefs, to align your actions with your truth. This alignment creates a sense of authenticity, a feeling that you are living in harmony with yourself, not driven by unconscious patterns, but guided by conscious intention. And this is where true personal growth happens, not in external achievements alone, but in the internal shift that allows you to experience life with clarity, with purpose, with meaning. As this journey unfolds, you begin to understand the deeper connection between belief and manifestation, how your thoughts influence your reality, how your expectations shape your experiences. And this is where the concept of the law of attraction becomes more than just an idea. It becomes a lived experience, a reflection of your internal state. When your beliefs are aligned with possibility, with confidence, with clarity, you begin to attract experiences that reflect that alignment, not through magic, but through the natural way your mind works, through the choices you make, the actions you take, the energy you bring to each moment. And this is where affirmations can play a role, not as empty statements, but as intentional reminders of the beliefs you are choosing to cultivate. As you integrate these practices into your daily life, you begin to notice a shift in your mindset, a movement toward a growth mindset, where challenges are seen as opportunities, where failure is seen as feedback, where learning becomes a continuous process. And this mindset supports your personal development, your journey of self-improvement, your commitment to daily growth. This journey also strengthens your mental toughness, your ability to remain grounded in the face of uncertainty, to stay focused even when old beliefs try to pull you back. And this strength is not about resistance. It is about resilience, the ability to adapt, to grow, to continue moving forward with awareness and intention. Through this process, you begin to rebuild yourself, not by rejecting your past, but by understanding it, by learning from it, by using it as a foundation for growth. And this rebuilding is what makes your journey truly life-changing, because it is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more of who you truly are. You start to feel a sense of confidence, not based on external validation, but on internal clarity, a confidence that comes from knowing that you are aware, that you are conscious, that you are capable of questioning, of choosing, of growing. And this confidence supports your success mindset, your ability to create a life that feels aligned with your values, your purpose, your vision. As this awareness continues to expand, you begin to see that belief is not something to be feared, but something to be understood, something to be used intentionally, something to be shaped with awareness. And this understanding brings a sense of empowerment, a recognition that you are not at the mercy of your beliefs, but the creator of them. And in this realization, something shifts deeply within you, a quiet sense of peace, a feeling that you are no longer bound by unconscious patterns, no longer trapped by limiting beliefs, but free to explore, to question, to grow. And as you continue to walk this path, you carry this awareness with you, a gentle reminder that what you believe shapes your world. And when you choose your beliefs consciously, you choose your reality with clarity, with intention, with truth. Power is not found in perfection. It is found in practice, in the quiet, repeated effort of choosing awareness again and again, even when your mind resists, even when old habits pull you back, even when the voice inside you whispers that you are not enough. Because in that moment, when you choose to show up anyway, when you choose to do your best with what you have right now, you begin to step into something deeper than success, something more meaningful than achievement. You step into mastery. You have already begun to see how beliefs shape your reality, how assumptions create illusion, how taking things personally binds you to unnecessary suffering. And yet knowing these ideas is not enough, because knowledge without practice remains distant, untouched, unable to transform your life. And this is where the fourth agreement becomes alive, not as a rule to follow, but as a living practice, a continuous commitment to do your best. Not the best someone else expects from you, but the best that is true for you in each moment. Your best is not fixed. It changes with your energy, your understanding, your awareness. And there will be days when your best feels strong, focused, clear, and there will be days when your best feels small, uncertain, fragile. And both are valid. Both are part of your journey. Because doing your best is not about comparison. It is about presence. It is about showing up with honesty, with intention, with the willingness to engage fully with your life. As you begin to live this practice, you notice something subtle but powerful. The pressure to be perfect begins to dissolve. The need to prove yourself begins to fade. Because you understand that perfection is an illusion created by the mind, a standard that shifts and changes, often used to judge, to criticize, to limit. And when you release that illusion, you create space for growth, for learning, for real progress. This space allows you to engage with your actions differently, to approach each moment not with fear of failure, but with curiosity, with openness, with the understanding that every experience is an opportunity to learn. And this shift transforms the way you see mistakes, no longer as evidence of inadequacy, but as part of the process, as necessary steps on the path of personal development. In this process, discipline becomes your ally, not as a force of restriction, but as a steady rhythm, a gentle structure that supports your growth, a reminder to return to awareness, to return to intention, to return to your practice. And this discipline is not about forcing yourself into rigid patterns. It is about creating consistency, about choosing again and again to align your actions with your values, your truth, your awareness. As this alignment deepens, your inner dialogue begins to shift. The critical voice that once dominated your thoughts starts to soften, replaced by a more compassionate, more understanding tone. And this shift is not accidental. It is the result of your practice, the result of choosing to observe your thoughts rather than immediately believe them, the result of questioning the judgments that once defined you. This new inner dialogue supports your emotional freedom, because when you stop judging yourself harshly, when you stop holding yourself to unrealistic standards, you create a space where growth can happen naturally, where you can explore, experiment, learn without fear. And in that space, you begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself, one based on respect, on understanding, on acceptance. That acceptance does not mean complacency. It does not mean you stop growing. It means you grow from a place of clarity rather than criticism, from awareness rather than fear. And this is where true transformation occurs, not in forcing change, but in allowing it, in creating the conditions where it can unfold naturally. As you continue to practice doing your best, you begin to see how it influences every aspect of your life. Your communication becomes more authentic, because you are no longer trying to say the perfect thing. You are expressing yourself honestly, clearly, with intention, and this authenticity creates deeper connections because people respond not to perfection, but to truth. At the same time, your relationships begin to shift because when you are doing your best, you no longer expect others to be perfect. You recognize that they are also navigating their own journey, their own beliefs, their own challenges, and this understanding brings compassion, patience, a willingness to accept others as they are while still maintaining your own boundaries, your own clarity. This clarity strengthens your mindset, moving you toward a growth mindset where effort is valued, where progress is recognized, where learning is continuous, and this mindset supports your journey of self-improvement, your commitment to daily growth, your desire to rebuild yourself in a way that aligns with your true potential. Through this process, you begin to experience a deeper sense of motivation, not driven by external rewards, but by internal fulfillment, the satisfaction of knowing that you are showing up, that you are engaging with your life fully, that you are participating in your own transformation, and this motivation becomes sustainable because it is rooted in purpose, in awareness, in intention. As your awareness continues to expand, you start to see how this practice connects with the larger dream of reality, how your consistent effort shapes your experience, how your actions influence your perception, how your commitment to doing your best creates a ripple effect that extends beyond you, influencing your environment, your relationships, your life as a whole. This is where manifestation becomes grounded in action, where the law of attraction is not just about thinking positively, but about aligning your thoughts, your words, your actions consistently, about living your truth daily, about embodying the beliefs you choose to hold. And through this embodiment, you begin to attract experiences that reflect that alignment. Your affirmations become more than words. They become expressions of your practice, reminders of your intention, reflections of your commitment to growth. And as you repeat them, not just with your voice, but with your actions, they begin to take root, shaping your mindset, influencing your behavior, guiding your journey. This journey also builds your mental toughness, not through resistance, but through resilience, through the ability to continue practicing even when it feels difficult, even when progress seems slow, even when old patterns try to return. And this resilience is what allows you to move forward, to stay committed, to trust the process. In trusting the process, you begin to release the need for immediate results, the desire for quick transformation, and instead, you embrace the journey itself, the gradual unfolding of awareness, the steady growth of understanding. And in this embrace, you find a sense of peace, a recognition that you are exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. This peace does not come from achieving a final goal. It comes from the practice itself, from the act of showing up, of engaging, of choosing awareness. And as you continue to live this way, you begin to see that mastery is not a destination. It is a way of being, a continuous process of learning, of growing, of evolving. You carry this understanding with you, not as a burden, but as a source of strength, a reminder that you have the power to shape your experience through your actions, through your awareness, through your commitment to doing your best. And in this realization, you find a sense of empowerment, a quiet confidence that grows with each step you take. That confidence is not loud. It does not need to prove itself. It is steady, grounded, rooted in your practice, in your awareness, in your willingness to continue. And as you move forward, you begin to feel a deeper connection to your life, a sense that you are not just observing your journey, but actively creating it, shaping it with intention, with clarity, with presence. And in that presence, in that continuous practice, you begin to experience something profound, a sense of alignment, a feeling that your thoughts, your actions, your awareness are working together, guiding you toward a life that feels authentic, meaningful, true. And as you continue to walk this path, doing your best in each moment, You realize that this is the essence of personal growth, not a final achievement, but a living, breathing process, one that unfolds with every choice you make, every step you take, every moment you choose to be present, aware, and fully engaged in the experience of being you. A quiet crack appears in everything you once believed, a subtle trembling beneath the surface of certainty, a whisper that asks you to pause, to question, to look again. Because what if the truth you've been holding so tightly is only a reflection, only a story, only an agreement you never chose consciously? And in that moment, something powerful begins to awaken inside you, something that refuses to accept illusions as reality anymore, something that dares to doubt. You begin to notice how much of your life has been shaped not by direct experience, but by interpretation, by the meanings you assigned, by the words you believed without question. And this realization does not arrive as chaos. It arrives as clarity. Because once you see that your mind has been trained, conditioned, domesticated to accept certain ideas as truth, you also realize that you have the power to unlearn, to reframe, to rebuild. And this is where your journey of true self-awareness deepens into something transformative, something alive. You have already begun to understand that words create worlds, that agreements shape perception, and that your inner dialogue has been guiding your emotions, your reactions, your entire experience of life. But now you step into something even more refined, something more precise, because it is not enough to simply speak carefully or avoid taking things personally. Now you are invited to question everything, to become aware of the hidden layers beneath every belief, every assumption, every conclusion you have ever made. Because the truth is, most of what you believe is not truth at all. It is interpretation, it is inherited thinking, it is repetition disguised as certainty. And once you see this, you begin to feel a strange kind of freedom, a lightness, because you no longer have to defend every idea that enters your mind. You no longer have to react to every thought as if it were real. You can pause, you can observe, you can doubt. Doubt becomes your ally, not your enemy. And this is where everything changes. You were taught that doubt is dangerous, that questioning leads to confusion, that certainty is strength. But what if certainty is the illusion? What if the real power lies in your ability to question, to listen deeply, to remain open, to recognize that every perspective is limited, including your own? And in that openness, you begin to access a deeper intelligence, a quieter truth that does not need to shout, does not need to prove itself. It simply is. As you move through your daily life, you start to see how quickly your mind jumps to conclusions, how easily it fills in the gaps with assumptions, how it creates entire stories from a single glance, a single word, a single moment. And you begin to catch yourself, gently, without judgment. You notice the patterns, the habits, the automatic reactions, and instead of being controlled by them, you start to observe them. And this observation alone begins to dissolve their power. Because awareness is transformation. The moment you become aware of a belief, it loses its grip on you. The moment you question an assumption, it begins to weaken. And the moment you choose to listen instead of react, you create space, space for understanding, space for truth, space for something new to emerge. You begin to listen not just to words, but to meaning, not just to others, but to yourself. And this listening is not passive, it is active, it is intentional. It is a form of mindfulness that allows you to see beyond the surface, to recognize when your mind is projecting, when it is interpreting, when it is distorting reality based on past experiences, fears, or expectations. And in this deeper listening, you discover something profound. You realize that every person lives in their own world, shaped by their own beliefs, their own agreements, their own experiences, and just like you, they are interpreting reality through the lens of their conditioning, their psychology, their mindset. And this realization brings compassion, because you stop expecting others to see the world exactly as you do. You stop taking things personally, not because you are trying to protect yourself, but because you understand that what others say and do is a reflection of their world, not yours. And this understanding creates emotional freedom, a sense of peace that does not depend on external validation or approval. At the same time, you become more responsible for your own words, your own thoughts, your own actions, because you see how powerful they are, how they shape your reality, how they influence your emotions, your relationships, your entire experience of life. And this awareness invites you to be impeccable, not in a rigid or perfectionist way, but in a conscious way, a mindful way, a way that aligns with truth rather than illusion. You begin to rebuild yourself, not by adding more beliefs, but by removing the ones that no longer serve you, the limiting beliefs, the inherited narratives, the unconscious patterns. And this process is not always comfortable, because it requires honesty, it requires courage, it requires you to face the parts of yourself that you may have ignored or avoided. But it is also deeply liberating, because with each layer you release, you come closer to your authentic self. Your mindset shifts from control to curiosity, from certainty to exploration, from reaction to awareness. And this shift transforms everything. Your communication becomes clearer, your relationships become more genuine, your inner dialogue becomes more supportive, more aligned with your growth. Your personal development accelerates not because you are forcing change, but because you are allowing truth to guide you. You start to notice how often people speak without truly listening, how often conversations are filled with assumptions rather than understanding. And instead of participating in this pattern, you choose a different path. You choose to listen deeply, to question gently, to seek clarity rather than confirmation. And this approach not only improves your communication, it also strengthens your connection with others, because people feel seen, heard, understood. And yet, even as you grow, you remain skeptical, not in a cynical way, but in a conscious way, a way that keeps you grounded, that prevents you from blindly accepting new beliefs just because they sound appealing. You understand that truth is not something you can be given. It is something you must discover, something you must experience, something you must feel within yourself. This is the power of doubt. It protects you from illusion. It keeps your awareness sharp. It reminds you to question, to observe, to stay present. And in this presence, you find a deeper sense of clarity, a clarity that does not depend on external validation, a clarity that comes from within. You begin to see life as a continuous flow of perception, a dream shaped by interpretation, and instead of trying to control every aspect of it, you learn to navigate it with awareness, with intention, with mindfulness. You become the observer of your own mind, the creator of your own experience, the author of your own story. Your affirmations become more than just words. They become conscious choices aligned with truth, grounded in awareness. Your manifestation becomes more intentional, not driven by desire alone, but guided by clarity, by understanding, by a deep connection with your authentic self. And as you continue this journey, you realize that personal growth is not about becoming someone else. It is about remembering who you truly are beneath all the conditioning, all the beliefs, all the illusions. It is about reclaiming your awareness, your freedom, your power. You develop mental toughness not by resisting challenges, but by understanding them, by seeing them as opportunities for growth, for learning, for deeper awareness. Your confidence grows not from external achievements, but from internal alignment, from knowing that you can trust yourself, that you can navigate uncertainty, that you can remain grounded even when everything around you is changing. This is the essence of a true success mindset, not the pursuit of perfection, but the commitment to awareness, to growth, to truth. And as you embody this mindset, you begin to influence others, not through force or persuasion, but through presence, through authenticity, through the way you live your life. Your life becomes a living audiobook, a continuous expression of mindfulness, motivation, psychology, and self-improvement, a story of transformation, of awakening, of conscious living. And in this story, you are not just the listener, you are the narrator, the creator, the one who chooses what to believe, what to question, what to let go. And in this quiet, powerful realization, something within you settles, not because everything is answered, but because you no longer need all the answers. You trust the process, you trust your awareness, you trust your ability to navigate the unknown, and this trust becomes your anchor, your foundation, your source of inner peace. You breathe a little deeper, you listen a little more closely, you observe a little more clearly, and without forcing it, without rushing it, you begin to feel lighter, freer, more aligned with the truth that has always been within you, waiting patiently for you to see it, to question everything else, and finally, to believe in your own awareness. Something inside you has been quietly whispering for years, a voice beneath the noise, beneath the beliefs, beneath the endless inner dialogue, a voice that has always known that the world you see is not exactly the world as it is, but the world as you were taught to perceive it, shaped slowly, carefully, almost invisibly, until one day you forgot that you ever had a choice. You were born into a dream that was already in progress, a dream created by countless minds before yours, filled with rules, expectations, agreements, and silent understandings, and from your very first moments, you began to learn how to fit into this dream, how to interpret it, how to survive within it. And this process felt natural, it felt necessary, it felt like truth, because everyone around you believed in it so deeply that questioning it never even seemed like an option. But now, something shifts within you, because you begin to see that this dream, this first attention, is not reality itself. It is a version of reality, a shared story, a collective agreement. And within this agreement, you were trained to see yourself in a certain way, to believe certain things about who you are, what you deserve, what is possible for you, and slowly, without realizing it, you became a character in a story you did not consciously write. And in that story, you were not always the creator. You were often the one reacting, the one adapting, the one seeking approval, the one trying to meet expectations, and in many ways, you became the victim of the very beliefs that shaped your identity, not because anyone intended harm, but because the system itself was built on unconscious agreements, on inherited ideas that were never questioned. This is the nature of human conditioning. It is subtle, it is persistent, it is powerful, and it teaches you to see yourself through the eyes of others, to measure your worth based on external standards, to believe that your happiness depends on circumstances beyond your control, and this belief, once accepted, becomes a limitation, a quiet boundary that shapes your entire experience of life. Yet the moment you become aware of it, something begins to change. Because awareness breaks the illusion of helplessness, awareness reminds you that even though you were taught to see the world in a certain way, you are not bound to that perception forever. You can question it. You can explore beyond it. You can begin to see the cracks in the story, the places where truth and illusion overlap, the moments where your interpretation is not the only possibility. And as you notice these cracks, you begin to understand the role of the victim, not as a label, but as a pattern, a way of perceiving reality where you feel powerless, where you believe that life happens to you rather than through you. And this pattern is not your fault. It was learned, it was reinforced, it was repeated until it became familiar, until it felt like part of who you are. But it is not who you are. It is simply a perspective, a lens, and like any lens, it can be changed. You start to observe how often your mind tells you stories that place you in a position of limitation, how it interprets situations as unfair, as personal, as fixed, and instead of immediately believing these stories, you pause, you breathe, you bring mindfulness into the moment, and you begin to question, Is this the only way to see this? Is this belief absolutely true, or is it just one interpretation among many? This questioning is not meant to create doubt in a negative sense. It is meant to create space, space for new possibilities, space for growth, space for transformation. And in that space, you begin to reclaim your power, not by controlling everything around you, but by becoming aware of how you perceive it. Because your perception shapes your reality. The way you interpret a situation determines how you feel, how you respond, how you move forward. And when you shift your perception, even slightly, you begin to experience a different reality, one that is not defined by limitation, but by awareness, by choice, by possibility. You begin to see that the dream of the first attention is filled with assumptions, assumptions about what things mean, assumptions about how people should behave, assumptions about what you are capable of. And these assumptions often go unnoticed. They operate in the background, influencing your thoughts, your emotions, your decisions, and bringing awareness to them is one of the most powerful acts of self-improvement you can practice. Because once you see an assumption clearly, you are no longer controlled by it. You can choose whether to keep it or release it, whether it serves your growth or limits your potential. And this choice is where your personal development truly begins, not in changing the world around you, but in changing the way you relate to it. And as this awareness deepens, your communication begins to transform. You start to listen more carefully, not just to what others are saying, but to the meaning behind their words, to the emotions beneath their expressions. And at the same time, you become more conscious of your own words, more intentional, more aligned with truth, because you understand that every word you speak is a reflection of your inner world, your mindset, your beliefs. You become impeccable with your word, not as a rule, but as a natural expression of your awareness, because you no longer want to contribute to confusion, to misunderstanding, to illusion. You want your words to be clear, to be honest, to be aligned with the truth you are discovering within yourself. And in this clarity, you find a new kind of confidence, not the kind that comes from external validation, but the kind that comes from self-awareness, from knowing that you are no longer blindly following old patterns, that you are actively engaging with your own growth, your own transformation. You stop taking things personally, not because you are suppressing your emotions, but because you understand that everyone else is also living within their own dream, their own first attention, their own set of beliefs and assumptions, and their actions are shaped by that, not by you. And this understanding creates emotional freedom, a sense of peace that is not easily shaken. At the same time, you become more compassionate, both toward others and toward yourself, because you see how deeply ingrained these patterns are, how much of your behavior was learned, how much of your thinking was inherited, and instead of judging yourself for it, you approach it with curiosity, with patience, with a willingness to learn and grow. This is where true transformation begins to take root, not in force, not in resistance, but in awareness, in acceptance, in the gentle but powerful act of observing your own mind, your own beliefs, your own reactions, and choosing, moment by moment, to align with truth rather than illusion. You begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself. Your inner dialogue becomes more supportive, more understanding, more aligned with your intentions. And this shift in your internal conversation has a profound impact on your external reality, because the way you speak to yourself shapes the way you experience the world. You cultivate a growth mindset, a perspective that sees challenges as opportunities, that sees mistakes as learning experiences, that sees life as a continuous journey of discovery. And this mindset fuels your motivation, your discipline, your commitment to self-improvement, not out of pressure, but out of genuine desire to evolve, to expand, to become more aware. And as you continue to navigate this journey, you begin to notice that the dream of the first attention loses its hold on you, not because it disappears, but because you no longer identify with it completely. You can see it, you can understand it, but you are not confined by it. You are not defined by it. You become the observer of the dream, the one who is aware of the story without being trapped inside it. And this awareness gives you a unique kind of freedom, the freedom to choose your response, the freedom to question your beliefs, the freedom to create a new narrative that is aligned with your truth. Your life becomes a living expression of mindfulness, of personal growth, of conscious living, a continuous unfolding of awareness, where each moment offers you the opportunity to deepen your understanding, to refine your perception, to align more closely with your authentic self. You begin to embody the principles of Toltec wisdom, not as abstract ideas, but as lived experiences, as practical tools that guide your daily life, helping you navigate challenges, build meaningful relationships, and cultivate a sense of inner peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. And through this embodiment, you naturally inspire others, not by trying to change them, but by being an example of what is possible, by showing that it is possible to break free from limiting beliefs, to overcome the patterns of conditioning, to live with awareness, with intention, with authenticity. This journey is not about perfection. It is about presence. It is about being aware of where you are, of how you think, of how you feel, and choosing again and again to align with truth, to question illusion, to grow beyond the limitations of the past. You continue to move forward, not with urgency, but with clarity, not with fear, but with curiosity, not with resistance, but with openness. And in this flow, you begin to feel a deeper sense of peace, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing that you are no longer a victim of your perceptions, but the creator of your awareness. And in that awareness, something beautiful unfolds, something steady, something real, a sense of connection to yourself, to the present moment, to the truth that has always been there, waiting patiently beneath the layers of belief, ready to be seen, ready to be lived, ready to guide you into a life of freedom, of clarity, of conscious choice. Something powerful begins to rise within you, not as noise, not as chaos, but as a quiet strength, a steady awareness that whispers, you are no longer asleep inside the dream. You are beginning to see it, to feel it, to understand that everything you once accepted without question is now open for discovery, for transformation, for conscious choice. And in this moment, you are no longer just a participant in the dream. You are becoming the one who can shape it. Because after seeing the illusion of the first attention, after recognizing how you were conditioned, how you once lived as the victim of unconscious beliefs, something shifts, something awakens, and that awakening calls you into a new way of being, a new state of awareness, a new level of consciousness where you are no longer controlled by the dream, but learning how to navigate it with intention, with clarity, with presence. This is where the second attention begins to unfold within you, not as an idea, but as an experience, as a living awareness that allows you to see beyond appearances, beyond assumptions, beyond the automatic patterns of your mind. And in this awareness, you begin to reclaim your power, not by fighting the dream, but by understanding it. You realize that the world you once believed was fixed is actually fluid, shaped by perception, influenced by belief, and open to transformation. And this realization does not make you feel lost. It makes you feel empowered, because now you understand that your reality is not something that happens to you. It is something that responds to your awareness, your mindset, your inner dialogue. And in this realization, you step into the role of the warrior, not a warrior who battles others, but a warrior of awareness, someone who is willing to face their own mind, their own beliefs, their own illusions, with honesty, with courage, with discipline. And this discipline is not rigid, it is not forced, it is a natural commitment to growth, to truth, to self-improvement. You begin to see how your thoughts create emotional reactions, how your interpretations shape your experiences, and instead of being carried away by every thought, You start to observe them, to question them, to choose which ones deserve your attention, and this choice becomes your power, your freedom, your path to transformation. Because the warrior understands something deeply important, that not every thought is true, that not every belief is real, that not every emotion needs to control your actions. And this understanding creates space for clarity, space for mindfulness, space for conscious living. You begin to practice awareness in your daily life, in your conversations, in your reactions, in your decisions. You notice when your mind wants to assume, when it wants to judge, when it wants to react based on past conditioning. And instead of following those patterns automatically, you pause, you breathe, you choose, and this simple act of choosing becomes a powerful form of self-mastery. Because mastery is not about perfection, it is about awareness. It is about being present enough to see what is happening within you, to recognize the patterns, to understand the beliefs, and to consciously decide how you want to respond. And this level of awareness transforms everything. Your communication becomes clearer, your relationships become more authentic, your inner dialogue becomes more supportive, more aligned with your growth. You become impeccable with your word, not as a rule you follow, but as a reflection of your awareness, because you understand that words have power, that they create meaning, that they shape perception, and you choose to use them with intention, with clarity, with truth. At the same time, you stop taking things personally, not because you are trying to protect yourself, but because you see clearly that everyone else is also living in their own dream, their own perception of reality, shaped by their own beliefs, their own experiences, their own conditioning, and their actions are a reflection of that, not a reflection of your worth. This understanding brings emotional freedom, a sense of peace that is not easily disturbed, because you are no longer reacting to everything as if it were about you. You are observing, understanding, and choosing your response with awareness. And as you continue to deepen this awareness, you also become more conscious of your tendency to make assumptions. You begin to see how quickly the mind tries to fill in the gaps, to create stories, to jump to conclusions. And instead of accepting these assumptions as truth, you question them. You seek clarity. You listen more deeply. You learn to listen not just to words, but to meaning, to intention, to the emotions behind the words. And this level of listening transforms your communication. It creates understanding, connection, trust, and at the same time, it strengthens your ability to think critically, to discern truth from illusion, to navigate the complexities of human interaction with wisdom and awareness. The warrior within you is not driven by fear, but by clarity, not by reaction, but by intention, not by control, but by understanding. And this shift in mindset creates a new way of living, a new way of experiencing the world, where you are not limited by old beliefs, but guided by awareness. You begin to see challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth, for learning, for deeper awareness. And this perspective builds mental toughness, not the kind that resists or suppresses, but the kind that understands, that adapts, that evolves. Your personal growth becomes a continuous journey, not a destination, a process of refining your awareness, of aligning your actions with your truth, of living consciously, intentionally, authentically. And this journey is supported by your willingness to always do your best, not in a way that demands perfection, but in a way that honors your effort, your intention, your commitment to growth. Because your best will change from moment to moment, from day to day, and the warrior understands this. The warrior does not judge themselves harshly for not being perfect, but instead focuses on being present, on being aware, on doing what they can with the awareness they have in that moment. And as you continue to walk this path, you begin to see the power of doubt in a new light, not as something that weakens you, but as something that strengthens your awareness, your ability to question, to explore, to remain open. And this openness allows you to see beyond rigid beliefs, beyond fixed perspectives, into a space of possibility, of transformation. You become more flexible in your thinking, more open in your perception, more willing to explore different viewpoints. And this flexibility enhances your ability to navigate the world with clarity, with wisdom, with understanding. Your life becomes a living expression of mindfulness, of personal development, of self-improvement, a continuous unfolding of awareness where each moment offers you the opportunity to grow, to learn, to align more closely with your truth. You begin to embody a success mindset, not defined by external achievements, but by internal alignment, by the quality of your awareness, by your ability to remain present, to remain conscious, to remain true to yourself. Your affirmations become more intentional, more aligned with your awareness. Your manifestation becomes more conscious, guided not by unconscious desire, but by clarity, by understanding, by a deep connection with your authentic self. And as this connection deepens, you begin to feel a sense of inner peace, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing that you are no longer controlled by the dream, but are learning to navigate it with awareness, with intention, with purpose. You are no longer the victim of your beliefs. You are the observer, the creator, the one who chooses what to believe, what to question, what to release. And in this choice, you find your freedom. The warrior within you continues to grow, to evolve, to expand, not through force, but through awareness, through presence, through a deep commitment to truth. And this journey, this continuous unfolding of awareness, becomes your path to mental freedom, to emotional resilience, to a life of conscious living. And in this quiet, powerful state of awareness, you begin to feel something profound, a sense of alignment, a sense of clarity, a sense that you are exactly where you need to be, learning, growing, evolving, becoming more aware with each moment, with each breath, with each conscious choice, moving gently, steadily, into a life that is not defined by illusion, but guided by truth, by awareness, by the quiet strength of the warrior within you. A deep stillness begins to settle within you, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of understanding, the kind that feels like everything is finally coming together, like the noise of confusion has softened, like the endless search for answers is no longer pulling you in every direction, because something inside you has shifted from seeking truth outside to recognizing it within. You have already walked through the layers of illusion. You have seen how the first attention shaped your identity, how it taught you to believe, to assume, to react without awareness, and you have stepped into the strength of the warrior, learning to question, to observe, to choose consciously. But now something even more subtle begins to emerge, something that cannot be forced, something that arises naturally when awareness becomes your way of being. This is where the third attention reveals itself, not as something you achieve, but as something you remember, something that has always been present beneath the layers of belief, beneath the conditioning, beneath the noise of the mind. And as you begin to sense it, you realize that this awareness is not separate from you. It is you. It is the essence of who you are beyond every story, beyond every label, beyond every agreement. You start to feel a profound clarity, not because you have all the answers, but because you no longer need them in the same way. The need to control, to define, to label everything begins to dissolve, and in its place, there is a quiet trust, a deep knowing that life is unfolding exactly as it needs to, and that your role is not to resist it, but to experience it fully, consciously, authentically. This awareness transforms the way you see everything. Your perception of reality becomes more fluid, more open, less rigid. You no longer see things as fixed truths, but as interpretations, as perspectives, as expressions of different levels of awareness. And this understanding brings a sense of freedom that is difficult to describe, because it is not something you think about. It is something you feel, something you live. You begin to notice that the voice in your mind, the inner dialogue that once dominated your experience, has softened. It is still there, but it no longer controls you. It no longer defines you. You can hear it, observe it, even appreciate it, but you are not bound by it. You are not trapped inside its narratives, and this creates a space within you, a space of presence, of mindfulness, of pure awareness. In this space, your communication becomes even more refined, more aligned with truth, not because you are trying to follow rules, but because you are naturally connected to a deeper level of understanding. Your words become simple, clear, intentional, free from unnecessary complexity, free from the need to impress or defend. And this simplicity carries a power, a presence that resonates with others on a deeper level. You are impeccable with your word, not as a discipline, but as a reflection of your state of being, because when you are aligned with truth, there is no need for distortion, no need for exaggeration, no need for illusion. Your words become an extension of your awareness, a bridge between your inner clarity and the external world. At the same time, you experience a profound level of emotional freedom, not because life has become easier, but because your relationship with it has changed. You no longer resist emotions, you no longer suppress them or become overwhelmed by them. You allow them to move through you, to be felt, to be understood, without attaching a story, without turning them into identity. You understand that emotions are not enemies. They are signals, expressions of your experience. And when you meet them with awareness rather than resistance, they lose their power to control you. They become part of the flow of life, part of the continuous movement of energy within you. This understanding deepens your compassion, both for yourself and for others, because you see clearly that everyone is at a different stage of awareness. Everyone is navigating their own dream, their own beliefs, their own conditioning, and instead of judging or trying to change them, you simply allow them to be, just as you are learning to allow yourself to be. You stop taking things personally at a level that feels effortless, because you see that nothing is truly about you. Everything is an expression of the other person's reality, their perception, their state of awareness, and this realization frees you from the need to defend yourself, to prove yourself, to seek validation. You also stop making assumptions, not because you are trying to avoid mistakes, but because you understand the nature of perception. You know that your mind can only interpret based on what it knows, and what it knows is limited. So instead of assuming, you remain open, curious, willing to listen, willing to explore, willing to understand. This openness enhances your ability to think critically, to discern truth from illusion, to navigate the complexities of life with clarity and wisdom. You become skeptical in the most conscious way, not rejecting everything, but not blindly accepting anything either. You listen, you observe, you feel, and then you choose what resonates with your awareness. The power of doubt becomes a quiet companion, not disrupting your peace, but supporting your clarity, reminding you to stay aware, to stay present, to stay open. And in this openness, you continue to grow, to evolve, to expand your understanding of yourself and the world around you. Your mindset shifts into something deeper than positivity, deeper than motivation. It becomes a state of alignment, a way of being where your thoughts, your actions, your intentions are all connected to your awareness, to your truth. And this alignment creates a sense of inner peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. You begin to experience life as a flow, a continuous unfolding of moments, each one offering you the opportunity to be present, to be aware, to be conscious. And in this flow, you no longer feel the need to control everything. You trust the process, you trust yourself, you trust the intelligence of life itself. This trust strengthens your discipline, not as a rigid structure, but as a natural expression of your commitment to awareness. You take actions that align with your growth, your values, your truth, not because you have to, but because you want to. because it feels right, because it is an extension of who you are becoming. Your personal development becomes a living experience, not something you read about or think about, but something you embody, something you practice in every moment, in every interaction, in every thought. And this embodiment transforms your life in ways that are both subtle and profound. You become a master of awareness, not in the sense of control, but in the sense of understanding, of presence, of connection. You understand the dream of reality. You see how it is created, how it is maintained, how it can be transformed, and within this understanding, you find your freedom. You are no longer trying to escape the dream. You are living within it consciously, aware of its nature, aware of your role, aware of your power to shape your experience. And this awareness allows you to engage with life fully, to enjoy it, to explore it, to express yourself within it. Your affirmations become expressions of truth, not attempts to convince yourself, but reflections of your awareness. Your manifestation becomes aligned with clarity, with intention, with authenticity. You are no longer chasing outcomes. You are aligning with the process, with the experience, with the present moment. And in this alignment, something beautiful unfolds, a sense of peace that is not fragile, not temporary, but steady, grounded, real, a peace that comes from knowing that you are connected to yourself, to your awareness, to your truth. You continue to grow, to learn, to evolve, but there is no urgency, no pressure, no sense of lacking. There is simply a natural unfolding, a continuous expansion of awareness, a deepening of understanding. And within this journey, you find fulfillment, not in reaching a destination, but in experiencing the path itself. You become a quiet presence in your own life, observing, experiencing, engaging, without losing yourself in the illusion, without forgetting your awareness, without disconnecting from your truth. And this presence becomes your greatest strength, your greatest guide, your greatest source of clarity. As you breathe into this awareness, as you allow it to settle, to integrate, to become part of who you are, you begin to feel a deep sense of ease, a gentle confidence, a quiet joy that does not need to be explained, that does not need to be justified. It simply exists, flowing through you, grounding you, guiding you. And in this calm, in this clarity, in this steady awareness, you realize that everything you have been searching for has always been here, within you, waiting not to be found, but to be recognized, to be remembered, to be lived. Something shifts in the way you see the world, not dramatically at first, not like a sudden flash of light, but like a gentle clearing, like fog slowly lifting from a landscape you've always lived in. And for the first time, you begin to notice details you once overlooked, patterns you never questioned, truths that were always present but hidden beneath layers of assumption. And in that quiet realization, you begin to understand. You are no longer just looking at life, you are beginning to see it. Because seeing is different from looking. Looking is passive, automatic, conditioned. It follows the habits of the mind, the agreements you were taught, the beliefs you accepted without awareness. But seeing requires presence. It requires you to step beyond the surface, beyond the interpretations, beyond the stories your mind creates, and to experience reality as it is, not as you were told it should be. And this is where your awareness deepens into something even more profound, something that transforms not just your thoughts, but your entire perception of reality. Because now you are not just aware of the dream, you are aware of how the dream is being created, moment by moment, through perception, through belief, through attention. You begin to notice how your mind constantly labels everything, how it turns experiences into words, how it uses language to define what is happening. And while this ability is powerful, it is also limiting, because the moment something is labeled, it is placed into a category, into a known framework, and that framework often prevents you from seeing it fully, from experiencing it directly. So you start to loosen your attachment to labels. You begin to observe without immediately naming, without immediately judging, without immediately interpreting. And in this observation, something beautiful happens. Your experience becomes richer, more vivid, more real, because you are no longer filtering everything through the past. You are allowing yourself to be present with what is. This presence is the essence of becoming a seer. It is not about gaining special abilities or mystical powers. It is about clarity, about awareness, about seeing beyond illusion, beyond the conditioned mind, into the truth that exists beneath it. And this truth is not something you need to search for. It is something you uncover by removing the layers that obscure it. You begin to see how much of your life was shaped by agreements you never questioned, beliefs that were repeated so often they became your reality. And as you bring awareness to these agreements, you start to see them for what they are: stories, interpretations, constructs of the mind. And once you see them clearly, you realize that you are not bound by them. This realization does not create chaos, it creates freedom. Because now, instead of reacting automatically, you can choose consciously. Instead of being limited by old beliefs, you can explore new perspectives. Instead of being trapped in patterns, you can step beyond them. And this ability to choose, to shift, to transform your perception becomes your greatest power. Your inner dialogue begins to change as well. You notice the voice that speaks within you, the one that comments, judges, analyzes, and for the first time, you see it not as your identity, but as a tool, a part of your mind that you can observe, that you can guide, that you can refine. And this awareness creates distance, not disconnection, but clarity, because you are no longer lost in the voice, you are aware of it. And in that awareness, you gain control, not by force, but by understanding. You begin to speak to yourself with more intention, more kindness, more truth. You become impeccable with your word internally as well as externally, recognizing that the way you speak to yourself shapes your emotions, your mindset, your entire experience of life. And as you refine this inner dialogue, you begin to feel a shift, a sense of alignment, a sense of coherence between what you think, what you feel, and what you express. At the same time, your relationship with others begins to transform. You listen more deeply, not just to respond, but to understand, to see beyond the words, beyond the surface, into the perspective of the other person. And this level of listening creates connection, authenticity, trust, because people feel when they are truly being heard. You no longer take things personally, not because you are trying to protect yourself, but because you see clearly that every person is living in their own dream, their own perception of reality, shaped by their own beliefs, their own experiences, and their actions are reflections of that, not reflections of your worth. This understanding brings a deep sense of emotional freedom. You are no longer reactive in the same way, no longer pulled into every conflict, no longer affected by every opinion. You remain centered, aware, present, and from this place, you can respond with clarity, with intention, with compassion. You also become more aware of the assumptions that once guided your thinking. You see how quickly the mind fills in gaps, how it creates stories based on limited information, and instead of accepting these stories as truth, you question them, you explore them, you remain open to other possibilities, and this openness expands your perception, allowing you to see more clearly, more fully. The power of doubt becomes an essential part of your awareness. Not doubt that creates fear or confusion, but doubt that invites curiosity, that encourages exploration, that prevents you from becoming attached to fixed beliefs. And this kind of doubt keeps your mind flexible, your perception open, your awareness sharp. You begin to develop a mindset that is both grounded and expansive, grounded in awareness, in presence, in truth, and expansive in curiosity, in openness, in the willingness to explore new perspectives. And this balance creates a powerful foundation for personal growth, for self-improvement, for continuous evolution. Your life becomes a practice, not in the sense of repetition, but in the sense of conscious living. Every moment becomes an opportunity to observe, to learn, to grow, to refine your awareness. And this practice is not something you force, it is something you embody, something that becomes part of who you are. You start to see the world with new eyes. Colors seem more vivid, experiences feel more alive, interactions become more meaningful, because you are fully present, fully engaged, fully aware, and this presence transforms even the simplest moments into something profound, something rich, something deeply fulfilling. You realize that the dream of reality is not something to escape, but something to understand, something to navigate with awareness, with intention, with clarity, and in this understanding, you find a new kind of freedom, the freedom to experience life fully without being controlled by it. Your discipline becomes natural, aligned with your awareness. You make choices that support your growth, your well-being, your truth, not because you have to, but because it feels right, because it resonates with who you are becoming. Your affirmations become more than just words. They become reflections of your awareness. Your manifestation becomes more intentional, guided by clarity rather than desire alone. And this alignment creates a sense of flow, a sense of ease, a sense that you are moving in harmony with life rather than against it. As you continue on this path, you begin to notice a quiet confidence growing within you. Not the kind that seeks validation or recognition, but the kind that comes from knowing, from understanding, from being connected to your awareness, your truth, your essence. And this confidence allows you to move through life with ease, with grace, with authenticity. You become a seer not by changing the world, but by changing the way you see it. You see beyond illusion, beyond assumption, beyond conditioning, into the truth that has always been there. And in this truth, you find clarity, you find peace, you find a deep sense of connection to yourself and to the world around you. And as this awareness settles within you, as it becomes part of your everyday experience, you begin to feel something profound, something steady, something real, a sense of being fully present, fully alive, fully aware, moving through life with a quiet understanding that everything you need to see, to know, to experience is already here, waiting for you to simply open your eyes and truly see. Words are not just sounds. They are forces, invisible currents shaping the way you see yourself, the way you feel, the way you connect with the world. And in this very moment, as you listen, as you absorb, as you reflect, you begin to realize something quietly powerful. You are not just receiving messages, you are a messenger. And this realization begins to unfold gently, because everything you have experienced so far, every shift in awareness, every moment of clarity, every doubt that opened your mind instead of closing it, has been preparing you for this deeper understanding. That communication is not only what you say to others, it is what you say to yourself. It is what you express through your actions, your emotions, your presence. You begin to notice that your entire life is built on communication, not just spoken language, but the silent language of thought, the emotional language of feeling, and the energetic language of intention. And each of these carries meaning, carries influence, carries the power to create or distort reality. This is where your awareness sharpens again, not outward, but inward, because before you can understand how you communicate with others, you begin to observe how you communicate with yourself. Your inner dialogue, that constant stream of thoughts, becomes clearer to you now. You begin to hear it with new ears, not lost in it, but aware of it, and you start to recognize patterns, tones, attitudes, the way your mind speaks to you when things go wrong, the way it celebrates or criticizes, the way it assumes, reacts, defends. And as you observe this internal language, you realize something deeply important. The way you speak to yourself is shaping your entire experience of life. If your inner voice is harsh, critical, full of doubt. Your world feels heavy, restricted, limited. But if your inner voice is clear, compassionate, aligned with truth, your world begins to open, to expand, to feel lighter, more possible. And this awareness gives you a choice, a powerful, life-changing choice. You can begin to change the language within, not by forcing positivity, not by denying reality, but by becoming impeccable with your word at the deepest level, by aligning your inner dialogue with awareness, with truth, with clarity. And this alignment becomes the foundation of your personal transformation, your self-improvement, your growth mindset. At the same time, you begin to notice how you communicate with others, how often words are used without awareness, how easily misunderstandings arise, how assumptions fill the gaps where clarity is missing. And instead of being caught in these patterns, you start to step back, to observe, to listen more deeply. Listening becomes your strength. Not just hearing words, but understanding meaning, feeling intention, recognizing the space between what is said and what is meant. And in this deeper listening, you begin to connect with others in a way that feels authentic, real, grounded in awareness rather than assumption. You realize that every person you meet is also a messenger, carrying their own beliefs, their own experiences, their own version of reality. And their words are not absolute truth. They are expressions of their perception, their conditioning, their mindset, and this understanding changes everything. You stop taking things personally at a deeper level, because now you see clearly, when someone speaks, they are revealing their world, not defining yours. They are expressing their beliefs, not determining your truth. And this awareness creates emotional freedom, a sense of peace that allows you to remain centered even in challenging conversations. At the same time, you become more responsible for your own words, because you understand their power. You see how they can build or break, how they can create clarity or confusion, how they can support growth or reinforce limitation. And this awareness naturally leads you to speak with intention. You begin to choose your words carefully, not out of fear, but out of respect for their impact. You speak with honesty, with simplicity, with clarity, and this way of communicating reflects your inner awareness, your commitment to truth, your dedication to conscious living. And as this awareness deepens, you begin to recognize three distinct ways of communicating, three languages that shape the way messages are created and received. And while they may not always be visible, they are always present, influencing every interaction, every relationship, every moment of connection. You notice the language of gossip, where words are used unconsciously, where assumptions are shared as facts, where stories are repeated without awareness. And you see how this language creates confusion, distortion, disconnection, and instead of participating in it, you begin to step away, not with judgment, but with awareness. You also recognize the language of the warrior, where words are used with intention, where communication becomes a tool for clarity, for understanding, for growth. And this language reflects your journey so far, your commitment to awareness, your discipline, your desire to align with truth. But then, something even deeper emerges. A language that goes beyond words, beyond interpretation, beyond the limitations of thought. A language of presence, of awareness, of direct experience. And in this language, communication is no longer about convincing or proving. It is about being, about expressing your truth through your presence, your energy, your authenticity. You begin to embody this language naturally. Your presence becomes your message. The way you listen, the way you respond, the way you hold space for others. All of it communicates something deeper than words ever could. And this way of being creates a profound connection, not just with others, but with yourself. You start to see that your life itself is a message. Every thought you choose, every word you speak, every action you take, all of it is shaping the story you are living, the reality you are creating. And this awareness empowers you to take full responsibility, not in a heavy or overwhelming way, but in a liberating way, because you realize that you have the power to choose. You can choose to speak truth or illusion. You can choose to listen with awareness or react with assumption. You can choose to align with clarity or remain in confusion. And these choices, moment by moment, begin to transform your life. Your communication becomes a reflection of your awareness. Your relationships become more authentic. Your inner dialogue becomes more supportive, more aligned with your growth. Your personal development accelerates because you are no longer operating unconsciously. You are actively engaging with your own transformation. You begin to see how this awareness connects to everything you have learned so far. The importance of not making assumptions, the freedom of not taking things personally, the power of being impeccable with your word, the discipline of always doing your best, the clarity that comes from doubt. All of it weaves together into a single, coherent understanding that your awareness is your greatest tool. Your ability to observe, to question, to listen, to choose. This is what allows you to navigate the dream of reality with clarity, with intention, with mindfulness. And as you continue to develop this awareness, you begin to feel a deeper sense of alignment, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing that you are living consciously. Your mindset shifts from reaction to creation. You are no longer simply responding to life. You are shaping it through your awareness, your choices, your communication. And this shift brings a sense of empowerment, a sense of control, not over external circumstances, but over your internal experience. You become more disciplined, not because you force yourself, but because your awareness naturally guides you toward choices that support your growth, your well-being, your truth. And this discipline becomes part of your identity, part of your way of being. You begin to experience the law of attraction in a new way, not as a mystical force, but as a reflection of your awareness, your mindset, your inner dialogue. Because what you focus on, what you believe, what you express, all of it influences what you experience. And this understanding allows you to be more intentional, more conscious, more aligned. Your affirmations become clearer, more grounded in truth. Your manifestation becomes more aligned with your awareness. Your journey of self-improvement becomes more focused, more meaningful, more connected to who you truly are. And as you continue to embody this awareness, as you refine your communication, as you deepen your understanding of the languages you use, you begin to feel something subtle but powerful, a sense of harmony, a sense of balance, a sense that your inner world and your outer world are no longer in conflict, but in alignment. You move through life with a quiet clarity. You listen, you observe, you speak, all with awareness, all with intention, all with a deep respect for the power of communication. And in this way of being, you become not just a messenger, but a conscious creator of your reality. And in that awareness, as your words become softer, clearer, more intentional, as your mind becomes quieter, more focused, more present, you begin to feel a gentle stillness, a sense that everything is unfolding as it should, that you are exactly where you need to be, communicating, growing, evolving, one conscious moment at a time. Something within you has shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply, quietly, like a truth that has been waiting patiently finally rising to the surface. And as you stand here at the edge of everything you've just experienced, you begin to feel it, a clarity that wasn't there before, a sense of awareness that now feels natural, almost effortless, as if you've been gently waking up from a long, familiar dream. Because this journey was never about adding something new to you. It was about removing what was never truly yours, the layers of belief, the assumptions, the conditioned thoughts that shaped your perception of reality without your awareness. And now, as those layers begin to dissolve, you start to see yourself more clearly, not as the identity you were taught to be, but as the awareness behind it. That awareness is where your power lives. And you can feel it now, in the way your inner dialogue has softened, in the way your reactions have slowed, in the way you pause before believing every thought that appears in your mind. Because something inside you has learned to question, to observe, to doubt in a way that opens your perception instead of closing it. And this is where true transformation begins. You are no longer trapped in the automatic patterns of the past. You are no longer controlled by every opinion, every assumption, every emotional trigger, because you've begun to understand one of the most powerful truths of all, that the dream of reality is not something happening to you. It is something you are constantly interpreting, shaping, creating through your awareness, your beliefs, your attention. And this realization brings a quiet sense of freedom. You don't have to react the way you used to. You don't have to believe everything you think. You don't have to carry every story that was handed to you, because now you can see them for what they are. Agreements and agreements can be changed. This is where your discipline becomes alive, not forced, not rigid, but conscious, intentional, aligned with your truth, because you understand that every moment is an opportunity to practice awareness, to be impeccable with your word, not just with others, but with yourself, to speak truth instead of illusion, to choose clarity over confusion. You begin to notice how naturally your communication starts to evolve. You listen more deeply, not to reply, but to understand. You speak more clearly, not to impress, but to express truth. And in this shift, your relationships begin to feel different, lighter, more authentic, because you are no longer projecting assumptions or taking things personally. You are simply present, aware, grounded. That presence becomes your strength. It becomes your anchor in moments of uncertainty, your clarity in moments of confusion, your calm in moments of emotional intensity. And from this place, you develop something that cannot be shaken easily: emotional resilience, a steady sense of self that is not dependent on external validation or approval. And this is where your mindset truly transforms, not into something artificial or forced, but into something real, something lived, something embodied, because your growth mindset is no longer just an idea. It is your way of seeing the world, your way of approaching challenges, your way of navigating life. You begin to see every experience as feedback, every interaction as a reflection, every moment as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to refine your awareness. And this perspective creates a powerful sense of momentum, a feeling that you are constantly evolving, constantly rebuilding yourself in alignment with your truth. This is the essence of personal development, of self-improvement, of personal growth, not chasing perfection, but embracing awareness, not forcing change, but allowing transformation to unfold through clarity and intention. And as this awareness deepens, something even more profound begins to take shape. You start to trust yourself, not blindly, not based on ego, but based on awareness, on presence, on your ability to observe, to question, to listen, to choose. And this trust creates a foundation for everything else. Your decisions become clearer, your direction becomes more aligned, your actions become more intentional. Your confidence boost is no longer dependent on outcomes. It is rooted in your awareness, your understanding that no matter what happens, you have the ability to respond consciously, to learn, to adapt, to grow. That is true mental toughness. Not resistance, not suppression, but awareness, flexibility, clarity, the ability to remain present and grounded even when life feels uncertain. And this strength allows you to move forward with a sense of ease, a sense of flow, a sense that you are not fighting life, but working with it. You begin to experience mindfulness not as a practice you have to remember, but as a state you naturally return to, a way of being that feels grounded, calm, aware. And in this state, your thoughts become clearer, your emotions become more manageable, your perception becomes more accurate. You start to notice how your manifestation changes as well. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are clearer, more aligned, more aware of what you are focusing on, what you are believing, what you are expressing, and this alignment brings a sense of harmony between your inner world and your outer experience. Your affirmations are no longer empty words. They become reflections of your awareness, your truth, your intention, and this makes them powerful, real, effective. Your success mindset is no longer about external achievements alone. It is about internal alignment, clarity, awareness, the ability to live consciously, to grow consistently, to evolve intentionally. And as you continue on this path, you begin to feel something deeper than motivation. You feel purpose, not a fixed destination, but a direction, a sense that your life is guided by awareness, by truth, by the desire to live consciously, to experience fully, to grow continuously. And this purpose fuels your daily growth, your commitment to becoming more aware, more present, more aligned each day. You are no longer just consuming a motivational audiobook, you are living it. You are embodying the principles, practicing the awareness, applying the understanding in real moments, real conversations, real experiences, and this is what makes it life-changing, not the words themselves, but the way you integrate them into your life. You begin to see clearly now the difference between truth and illusion. Truth feels simple, clear, grounded. Illusion feels heavy, confusing, reactive. And with this awareness, you naturally move toward truth, not because you have to, but because it feels right, because it brings peace, clarity, freedom. That freedom is what you were seeking all along. Freedom from limiting beliefs, freedom from unnecessary suffering, freedom from unconscious patterns. And now you understand that this freedom is not something given to you. It is something you create through awareness, through choice, through presence. You are rebuilding yourself, moment by moment, thought by thought, choice by choice. This is your journey of rebuild yourself, your path of conscious living, your commitment to growth, to clarity, to truth. And as you sit with this awareness, as you let these realizations settle, you begin to feel a quiet sense of completion, not because the journey is over, but because you now understand how to walk it, how to navigate it, how to continue evolving with awareness. So take this moment, breathe it in, feel the clarity, the calm, the presence you've cultivated, and carry it with you into your daily life, into your conversations, your decisions, your experiences. And if this journey has resonated with you, if it has sparked something within you, if it has helped you see yourself and your reality more clearly, then stay connected to this space of growth and awareness. Like this audiobook, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Cliff Note Chronicles for more motivational video experiences, more self-help insights, more journeys into awareness, psychology, and transformation. Because this is not the end of your journey. This is where your awareness truly begins to lead the way, quietly, steadily, guiding you toward a life of clarity, purpose, and conscious creation.